Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and my guests today are Sue Abers and her son Adam Abers from the Abers Acres fruit and vegetable farm in Kennedy, is it?
In Kennedy, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, how many years have you run a fruit and vegetable farm? When did you start doing that?
We started our business in 1984, so I don't know, you do the math. It seems like it's been close to 40 years maybe.
Oh,
So,
I suppose.
yeah.
Is that before you were born, Adam?
I was born in '79, so no.
No. Okay.
I was just a little kid, but yeah.
He's our firstborn child.
Oh,
so
okay.
he,
You're the
he was,
oldest.
yeah. So
Yeah.
all about the
Yep.
same time we started the business and started having our
Uh-huh.
family. So
So that's something that you enjoyed doing then?
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh. And originally it didn't start out as an organic farm?
No, the first probably 15 or 20 years, we tried to practice integrated pest management is the term they used then, where you just used sprays when you needed them and, if you need them. And then about the time Adam graduated from college, he came on board and he seemed really knowledgeable with organic practices and more of a paperwork guy, because there's a little more paperwork involved with growing, food organically and documenting it to be a certified organic farm. And he was willing to take on that responsibility. And so at that time, we just made the decision to convert completely to a certified organic farm. And, we had the next generation coming along to help us. And
Okay, so how long ago was it when you made that decision?
I think the first acreage was certified in 2008, but it was a 3-year transition period from where the last use of anything that would be considered prohibited according to the National Organic Program. So that would have been like, the last use would have been in like 2005. So then 2008 was when the majority of the acreage in the land became certified organic. So
Okay, okay. What was the reason that you decided you wanted to go organic?
Well, I would say we were pretty much, not using very many chemicals anyway, and we had found that, some of our things where we were, it just seems like crops get kind of an immunity to certain chemicals, and we just, I don't know. And then besides that, this safety and health of our, employees and ourselves, and we had somebody, our son was willing to kind of take on the project with us, so.
you were kind of headed in that direction anyways, just wanting to get more away from that anyways, and just, nobody wants to be exposed to that stuff anyways, so it was just kind of, organic was like the next kind of step.
It was just kind of a scary step, taking the whole plunge, and just in case you had like a whole crop of strawberries or something.
Right,
and you're afraid, well, what if I'm going to lose it if I don't use the spray? You don't want to lose your whole year's worth of income, but
No.
it's a little bit scary, but you just have to have faith, and we kind of took that leap of faith. And
The organic, it kind of forces you to kind of focus more on the health of your crop and your plant too, since you don't have as many pesticides or whatever at your disposal, or any synthetic treatments like that. You're kind of more focused on the health of your crop, the health of the soil and everything. So that becomes more of a focal point, as opposed to just grow it and then deal with whatever pest comes with whatever spray you have available. It's not, because there are some organic input sprays, but they're not nearly as effective. So you're just kind of, at that point, you're forced, to kind of just focus more on the health of your crop, vegetables or whatever you're growing.
Right.
Exactly.
And there's certain foods on the Dirty Dozen list that you cannot remove the pesticides and like
Right.
that.
They're
like that
systemic. That
from-
means they're
It gets
taken up
right
internally,
inside.
and then they basically protect the plant from, emitting it from, them, so insects can't eat it, or a fungus can't infect, the plant cells or whatever. So.
Okay. I'm going to have you, Adam, I know you're good at this because you spoke at one of our Vegetarian Society dinners. I'm going to have you take us on the journey through the transition from non-organic to organic gardening.
You mean just like as a farm, or?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, basically, you just can't use any synthetic chemicals, and there's a whole list that's for certified organic. You have a third-party verification, which is a certifier, and you have to run all your practices by them, and anything that you use considered an input. From sprays, fertilizers, anything, and they approve it. And
Yep.
If you're organic, obviously you're looking for things like an OMRI label, which is kind of an independent company that will verify if a product, meets the criteria of the National Organic Program, meaning there's no synthetics, it's natural, and it's allowable. So. And basically, from that point, you're kind of on your own. you're just trying to figure out what you can use, and you're like for us, a lot of it was more focused on soil testing of nutrients first of all, to make sure that our nutrients in the soil were balanced, so that the crops were growing, healthy and weren't deficient, because that's the first point at which you'll usually get, an insect or a disease problem would be from a deficiency in the soil. So. That's kind of the first place where we started, was to focus on that. And then also was, we were already, before we went into the transition, we were already using cover crops quite extensively, because, when you're growing a crop, plants go through succession, and cover crops kind of act in a similar way, whereas, some plants will do better, or crops will do better after another crop was previously grown. So that was kind of another thing that we could use to increase the health of the soil and the subsequent crops. And just kind of been going from there. We still use a lot of cover crops, and we're still testing the soil. And as you get more into it, you just kind of, I don't know, your footsteps out in the field is the best fertilizer that they say. So just being out there and observing what your plants look like, and what things look like out there too. Further beyond that, you just start to look at maybe not having such large of acreages of fields of one thing, because that's really appealing to any pest, be it insect, disease, even wildlife. They have a virtual buffet if it's something they can eat. So you look at smaller plantings, and even doing polycultures where you're growing several crops together. They can even be symbiotic. A lot of people know about the Three Sisters, the corn, beans, and squash that Native Americans grew. It's the most famous one. But plants that are synergistic and can help each other, that's kind of the next step beyond, and something that you can really help to increase the health of your crop with is that. And there's just more and more things. And just as an individual farm, you kind of have to start to just look at what's going on the farm, and what you can do to make little improvements. But generally, the focus is on just increasing the health of your crop and your soil. Mm-hmm. And then at that point,
Another comment with that, feeding the health of your crop and everything too, that makes the product that we raise a little more nutrient dense too for the consumer. Right. People are interested when they buy organic, fruits and vegetables in nutrient density, and that's just kind of a side effect of really taking care of your plants, more carefully like we do.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, benefit.
They say, because some insects can't even feed when, some insects are actually indicators of poor nutrition, things like aphids and things like that will go after plants that have been kind of over-fertilized with nitrogen fertilizers but lacking other nutrients, and they'll have what they call watery cell, where it's just not as dense in sugars. Some growers will even use something called a refractometer and squeeze plant sap and be able to test, how dense the sugars are basically in the plant sap, and kind of get an indication of what kind of mineral level they have in their plants with a tool like that. And there's also tissue testing, but we're so busy in the summertime that we don't often get into that, but we really try to focus on on the soil test and make sure things are right in the soil. And then subsequently with the cover crops, it helps the biology in the soil so that all those nutrients are available to the plants. Because different plants, like I was talking about the cover crops, they have slightly different exudates coming out of the roots, and those are the kind of things that are making minerals available in the soil for other crops and even for those crops, you know. Weeds, it's part of the reason weeds thrive is because they have the ability to thrive in situations that are less than ideal for, like, a lot of times our crop plants. So a lot of times you can use the weeds as an indicator of maybe what's slightly wrong with the soil or something like that, just by reading them, you know, and knowing what you're looking for.
Yeah, I've been really concerned in recent years, you know, about the use of pesticides and weed killers and things like that. I'm presently in the process of reading a book called The World According to Monsanto. And it is terrifying. It is terrifying reading. It feels like to read this book, it feels like there must hardly be any place that's safe anymore. You know, what some of these big companies have been doing. Monsanto apparently was the creator of Agent Orange, and their product, their weed killer that they call Roundup, actually has one of the ingredients from Agent Orange in it, I believe.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
So, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, Roundup, which is, you know, a trade name for the chemical called glyphosate, was actually
Right.
originally, I can't remember what it was used for, but it was a chelating agent, so it works by literally binding up minerals. And when you use that, on a piece of land or on a plant, you know, it's binding up minerals. So obviously, right off the bat, that plant isn't going to get those minerals.
Oh.
You know,
Oh, really?
because that's what its original use was, a chelating agent. So
Oh. Oh.
yeah, and then they found out that it killed weeds. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is another thing. In order to use Roundup, they had to genetically modify foods, and
Yeah.
by somehow shooting some sort of leptins, I think it is, into you know, other foods.
in plant cells, yeah.
Yeah, and things that are not actually, well, like for instance, they make insect-resistant vegetables by genetically modifying them with genes from insecticides.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, like the BT gene was from, it's actually a gene from, I think it's a bacteria, because there's actually an organic product called Bacillus thuringiensis that produces a toxin, and you would spray it on there, but that toxin produced by, it's either bacteria or fungus, I don't remember, but it would make it so the insects couldn't feed on your plants, and that's actually, that's the dipel, it's an organic fungicide. But what they've done with genetic engineering is they've taken the genes from that fungus or bacteria, like I said, I don't remember which it is, and they've actually inserted it into the plant, so the plant is just producing this toxin constantly in it, and they, I think they use a promoter gene so that it's turned on. There's, you know, with the organism, the gene has an on-off switch, but when they genetically modify it, they put a promoter gene in it, which keeps it just producing this all the time. So, and it's really common in cotton. That's why, like, if you're buying like non-organic cotton, and some people have had a lot of allergic reactions from that. And yeah, I mean, there's even sweet corn varieties, and there's a lot of, you know, I don't know if there's a lot of conventional corn varieties because we don't grow a lot of grain corn, but I'm sure there are, you know, where insects are a big problem. But yeah.
So basically, in my opinion, because of this, I think that people who are eating these genetically modified plants that are supposed to be resistant to insects are actually eating an insecticide
Right.
when they're eating the fruits and vegetables that
Right.
are genetically modified in this way.
Right.
And so,
Not to mention when they don't really know what they're doing when they're inserting genes. They're just learning now that genes work in groups, and one gene can be grouped in with others, and there's just the whole profile, nutritional profile of the plant could be thrown off just by inserting another gene. So I honestly, I don't think they've done enough testing on it either, with,
well, I know Monsanto has pulled a lot of dirty tricks and gotten a lot of people in trouble and so forth, like with genetically modified corn, I think it was, that I read something about. To begin with, they would be selling it to certain farmers, and then those certain farmers would have next door neighbor farmers that were not using the genetically modified seeds. So Monsanto was going out and sending spies out to see, because things get blown around in the wind.
Cross-contamination.
So they were, so they would send out spies to find out if some of their corn was growing in non-customers' farms, and then suing the farmers for what they called, was it something on the order of copyright infringement?
Similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they basically, they've patented genes, which is kind of scary in the first place. I mean, it's taking away, you can't save your seeds anymore, first of all, and if you do, they'll try to sue you, which has happened in a number of cases. So.
Yeah, and then these small farmers wind up going out of business.
Right.
Because they can't. And then the genetically modified, the cotton you were talking about, the BT cotton. That's turned into a serious problem in the country of India.
Right.
Especially
where they're handling it all the time, and if you're doing that every day, of
right,
course you're
right,
going to get sick.
Yeah, and then there's problems somehow with it not working out with the cotton too. And I've heard that the suicide rate is kind of high among people in India who are farmers that raise cotton.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, it's already. They already have had a lot of problems with that, just because they've sold them these genetically modified crops, and they've had some crop failures and some problems with them. So yeah,
yeah.
And that's their livelihood. So
right. So it's really difficult doing that. But I'm glad you came on, because this is a really important topic. But
yeah.
Okay, what types of varieties of food do you grow on your farm?
We are very diversified. We probably specialize in the small fruits, the strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. That's kind of our signature crops. But when we became certified organic, we really upped our game. Before that, we grew the basic vegetables, your corn and your bean and your peas and potatoes, things like that. But now we grow all of our own lettuces, kale, beets, carrots. What else? Lots of different, small crops. We probably have over 75 varieties of crops that we grow right now, and because we can't get the crops, organically grown, certified organically grown, to sell at our market, and we want to make sure our market is,
in your market, you kind of opened up for a lot of these other crops that you didn't used to have as much demand for. So that was.
And then part of the organic growing too is being really diversified, like Adam spoke of. Having a lot of different crops, and you don't usually get too bad infestations of any one problem if you're diversified.
And they're not all. You're not having huge blocks or huge tracts of land that are just devoted to one, monocrop.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I've run across your strawberries at the Tops grocery store in Mayville from time to time. So whenever I see them there, of course, I get them. Usually the only time I buy strawberries is when the locally grown
When they're in
ones
season.
are in season, I always figure that's enough because so many people use pesticides and things.
Yeah.
I figure that's enough poison for one year.
Yeah.
And because strawberries are on the dirty dozen
Yeah,
list.
they
Yeah,
are one of
yeah,
those
they are.
And
crops.
because you cannot wash the pesticides and things off of them, but I remember that they are very delicious. Where all do you sell them? Do most of your customers come directly to the farm?
Yes, we are pretty diversified in that way too. We have our farm stand in Kennedy, and we also have a location in Warren, Pennsylvania with a farm stand. We do 3 farmers markets. We do the Westfield, the Lakewood, and the Jamestown farmers markets. We supply product to I think 3 different CSA groups that take our product, into places such as Fredonia, Buffalo, and out by East Auto, I guess, is the other CSA group we deal with. And then we do the pick your own on our farm as well, so people can do that. So we have, and then wholesale. We do sell to Wegmans and to Tops Market some.
Okay. Yeah.
So we have a lot of different channels, and it's good for us. It gets our name out there. Wegmans especially really promotes the organic, which we appreciate too. And so people know where we're at. They pick it up in the grocery store or whatever. Then if they want more, they come down to the farm, try picking their own, or visiting us at our home farm. So
Yeah, I think the Wegmans is important for having that organic certification. The direct store delivery kind of situations really appreciate having that,
Yeah.
Otherwise, if everything was just going like from the farm directly to people, you would necessarily need to be certified. You could just explain to people
Yes.
how you were raising your crops, but
Yeah.
going through grocery stores, it's nice. It is like the third-party verification for them, so that they know that we were, the crops were grown according to the standards and
Organic
everything.
standard.
So.
yeah.
Now, one friend of mine, she's the other coordinator for the Vegetarian Vegan Society, and we were talking about corn, and I was talking about how these certain kinds of worms, when we have it in our own garden in our backyard, how we'll run across ears of corn that have these certain kind of worms in them. And I remember she commented to me that she prefers the ones that have the worms in them because she knows those are the best tasting
Right.
ears of
Right.
corn, because the worms, she goes, are smart, and they know which ears of corn are the best tasting
They know the
ones.
organic corn too. They know what corn to stay away from. So
Right.
So what are those called? Some sort of borer worm?
Yeah, I think there's about like 4 or 5 of them. There's
4 or 5 kinds.
well, there's 2 strains of the European corn borer. There's an E and a Z strain. There's a corn earworm. There's a fall armyworm, and there's a western bean cutworm. We know because we work with the extension, the IPM program in Cornell, and there's a trap network where they use pheromone traps to catch and just monitor the population, because these populations will change with the growing degree days, and some of them come in on the wind, especially the corn borers can kind of come in, on some of the like southerly winds when you start to get them. But
the winds blow them in?
some of them do, yeah, and some of them do over winter, and some of them kind of come in with the seasons like that. I can't remember which ones come from which, but we monitor them anyways, and we know what populations are, and also posting it on this network, any growers in the area can kind of know that in Kennedy and then in whatever other locations what kind of catches they're getting, and if they are going to spray. That's what she was talking about in the beginning, like the IPM, Integrated Pest Management, rather than just going out and spraying on a schedule. Integrated Pest Management would be something like this, where you're keeping track of when numbers are high, then maybe someone would go spray rather than just on a regular schedule. But we like to know, we don't spray anything, but we still like to know if the numbers are high.
Oh.
For the corn borer, we actually do use, we buy an insect, it's a parasitic wasp that we buy in from IPM Labs. I think they're in Locke, New York. But we order it, I think you have to order it like 3 weeks ahead of time because they have to incubate them. But they come in these little cards, and we just go out there and hang them on the corn plants when they're about like maybe 1.5 feet tall. And they will actually parasitize the European corn borers. They do a really good job with the
really
European
good.
corn borers. But I mean, we will still have some trouble with the corn earworms and the fall army worms and the western bean cutworms when they're an issue. But usually early on, the corn borers are the biggest issue. So it actually really works good for that.
Yeah, and these wasps don't create any problems of their own then?
Nope, they're just little tiny things.
They're just
they don't
little
sting.
tiny things?
They're very specific to the corn borer, so it works out really
okay.
good. I don't even think they overwinter. I don't think they're tough enough to overwinter.
So you have to get
you
more.
have to purchase them each year, yep. And usually we've learned actually to do that each year. Well, actually, our corn plantings will kind of grow in succession, so a lot of times we'll put the next succession right next to the other one. That way this population has built up. It's like the checks and balances for these corn pests, and then it's already in place for the next one, because we'll usually just get our parasitic wasp in the beginning, but they're going to live throughout the summer. They're not gonna die until there's like a hard frost or killing frost, and all the plants are dead anyways. So, but that's worked really good especially for that particular pest.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then sometimes you do get some of the other pests come into the corn, but it's usually a little later in the season. And
yeah, we always, like I said, have a garden in back of our house every year, a vegetable garden. My husband actually has ordered some strawberry plants for this year. We had some quite a few years ago in the garden. Back in the 1980s, we had some strawberries. And then we had a couple of drought-like summers, like around 1988 and 89, I think it was. And they just kind of fizzled out after that. So, but now he wants to try having some again.
Some strawberries again.
Have you got any hints on keeping strawberry plants healthy?
Yeah, I mean they are a perennial, but over time they just keep developing more crowns off the same plant. So I mean, one trick you can kind of thin the crowns down to like 2, but they will also produce runners. So they're kind of eventually all those daughter plants are kind of competing with the other plants, and they're making it hard. But yeah, I mean there's different techniques to renovate. Usually just thinning them out, just so that there's not so many plants that they are crowding each other out. You just want kind of more of an ideal spacing, like anywhere from like 6 inches apart to about 1 foot apart per plant, including the runners, just so that also what the plants that are there make decent, nice sized fruit, and they aren't competing for nutrients and light and water and all that stuff. But and then in the winter, come like December, when it starts getting cold, we usually mulch them over with straw to protect them from because the cold can do a lot of damage to them, especially if you're not getting good amount of snow to insulate them. So, and then there's mice and deer like them in the winter, so everything wants them. So
yeah,
you just move from one to the next, one issue to the next. But
well, getting back to the corn, since we don't spray our vegetable garden, we do get the worms in them. Not every year or anything like that. It's nothing really too terrible. But I always say I'd rather put up with the worms getting into some of the ears of corn than to eat corn that has that's been sprayed with poison. So. And our corn usually turns out pretty good anyway, so. But it's just like, with household cleaners, a lot of people think they have to use the really toxic household cleaners to kill germs in their house, and I always say I'm more afraid of the toxic household cleaners than the germs, and prefer to use more natural ones. And I've even been trying some recipes for natural household cleaners. So
good.
But another thing is with the corn is and maybe certain other things too, is the raccoons. Do you have corn at your farm? And
yeah, raccoons. A lot of times, like even this past year, we had to put up electric fence, just a 3-wire. 2 of them were electrified to keep the raccoon out. We used to have farm dogs that would actually, they had a radio wire that went around, actually one at both farms. But they've just gotten too old and they passed away. But, and we haven't
we want to start some more, but
you'll have to get some puppies.
Yeah, we need some puppies. If anybody's listening and they have puppies and they're reasonably priced.
There's a certain training process for these farm dogs.
Yeah, there was. Basically, like you would with any radio. The radio collar fence system where you just put up the flags and you kind of train them. They usually get a little beep when they get close, and then when they get too far, they would get a shock and they'd back off. But that was how many years ago?
Yeah, it was probably 15 or 20 years ago when we started those dogs.
It was a while ago, but yeah, it's just a process like that. And once they're used to it, they know. And the nice thing about the dogs is they take care of a lot of different wildlife. We'll say they can't catch birds, obviously, but as far as raccoon go and deer and woodchucks and things like that,
they do a good job of keeping them away from
they do a really
the plants.
They do a really good job at that. So
my husband didn't plant any corn last year. He said he didn't feel like he was going to have time to fight with the raccoons all summer. So but normally we have corn.
Yeah.
And he puts up an electric fence around the corn too.
Does he?
And yes, and sometimes they figure out a way to get in anyway.
If you have a small enough planting, I raise poultry too, and these electrified poultry netting works really good to keep raccoons out too, because there's just like
electrified poultry netting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's better. You can build it a higher fence?
Well, it's already put together. That's got like there's little strands of wire with this plastic filament. It's a netting, electrified netting, and they use it for goats and sheep and other stuff too. But I found that with just regular single strand electric fences, sometimes the raccoons can get underneath or between, but this netting, they would have to climb up it and they'd get a pretty good shock.
Oh, yeah.
And they usually come in like 165-foot rolls, so if you just had a small plot of corn, it might work really well to keep them out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I hadn't heard of that before, but that's a really good idea.
I use that around my chickens and ducks sometimes to keep
them. Have you ever tried raising honeybees over there at Abers Acres?
I haven't. No. We have a neighbor that actually has quite a few hives, and we sell his honey at the stand. So
his bees pollinate a lot of our crops, I think, too.
Yeah, we've, for about, way over close to 30 years now, I think, my husband and I should word it that we try to have a few hives of our own.
Do you?
But it's gotten to where it's really, really difficult, with all of the problems that the honeybees are having. It's hard to keep them alive, really, because of
healthy.
all of the problems. There's all of these bee diseases that I don't know that I ever heard of before. They almost seem to be increasing.
Yeah.
And then there's they probably come in contact with pesticides.
Right.
So you have to think that being an organic farm, or if you have beehives as well, having organic crops for them to feed on is probably definitely a benefit.
More hospital too.
Yeah.
Also growing like the cover crop buckwheat. I mean, honeybees love buckwheat, so that works out pretty good too.
So you use buckwheat for a cover crop?
Buckwheat is a very good cover crop because it actually has a very allopathic effect, which means it exudes chemicals out of its root that suppress weeds. So it's perfect when you take a buckwheat crop and you work it into the soil. You have a pretty nice weed-free ground. That's ideal for organic because you don't have anything else to help you manage weeds with. So it's something that we use a lot in our crop rotations.
Well, it's kind of funny. I remember normally the spring and summer honey is a very light color. The early summer that you would extract like around late July or something like that. But one year we were extracting the honey and it was this dark brown color, and we're going, that doesn't look like the way the honey usually does at this time of the year. I said to Carl, you know, if I didn't know better, I'd swear that was buckwheat honey. You know, just from the appearance of it. Well, a few weeks later, I was talking to somebody who lives, you know, maybe about 3/4 of a mile from us, and she happened to make the comment to me that that back when it was blossoming, when the buckwheat was blossoming, that it was completely covered with honeybees. And I said to her, so that's when I told her, I said, oh, so that's where they got it, you know? Because I said, you know, it sure did look like, look and taste more like buckwheat honey than what we usually get for the spring and early summer flow. And when I told her about it, we had a really good laugh about it. You know, that they were our honeybees were going over to their place to forage.
Yeah, it's funny when you go out there and they're in blossom and you just hear the field buzzing. You know that there's bees. I mean, not just honeybees, but a lot of wild pollinators. And other kinds of bees too.
I love bumblebees.
Yeah,
you
me
know,
too.
They're pretty docile too, like the honeybees. I've actually never ever been stung by a bumblebee.
I don't think
I even
either,
had one once when I was about a junior high age. I had one even when I was going for a walk one time down the road, have one fly up inside the shirt I was wearing one day, and I, you know, just sort of stood still and it buzzed around in there for a minute or so, and then it went flying back out. And you know, then I had this orange T-shirt that had brightly colored flowers embroidered on it.
That's what
And
they were
every
after.
time, whenever I'd wear that T-shirt, bumblebees would always
come around,
land on the front of my T-shirt and things like that. They're kind of fun, but you know, some people get so darn scared as soon as they see a bumblebee. You know, but
they're a good pollinator, especially because they can be out when it's colder than honeybees and a lot of the other pollinators can be. So that's what, especially like the blueberries in particular will blossom kind of early like that when it's cold, and their flower is kind of difficult anyways for honeybees and stuff to get in, so it's really ideal for bumblebees, and they sonicate the flower, meaning they vibrate a lot when they're in there, so they're really like the best pollinator, I think. For what was it, 2 or 3 years we bought bumblebees when we first had the tunnels for strawberries. But I don't know, after a while we didn't, and we found there was enough bees around that were actually just going in the tunnel and pollinating, so but yeah, I think they're probably one of the better pollinators. But
yeah, we have 3 blueberry bushes in our yard, and I don't usually see the honeybees on their blossoms, but you see all kinds of other insects on them. In order to protect them, so the birds don't eat them all and we get to eat some, my husband puts up, well, he's got it kind of like a frame, you know, that he has netting over, so we have to go inside the netting to pick the blueberries. He has that to protect them from the birds eating them all, and then he's got an electric fence outside the netting to keep the raccoons from getting into the blueberries. So it's quite a lot of work to be able to have enough food for yourself.
Everything wants them.
Really. So let's see, I had something else on my mind that I wanted to ask you. It's kind of slipped my mind a little bit here. But it's the pictures, yes. I wanted to ask Chris if those pictures that we scanned, did they show up, Chris? No? because Sue emailed some pictures she'd taken of their farm to
Yeah.
show on the screen, but I guess we're not going to be able to
do
see
that.
them.
Aw.
So you grow Christmas trees too. You
Yep, we
said.
grow Christmas trees as well, yep.
And have you always done that?
Yeah, we've grown Christmas trees, maybe not the first couple of years. In the beginning, I think, it was probably maybe 4 or 5 years before we started selling some trees, which we bought from a neighbor. And then, we decided that was just another way to extend our season a little longer. And so we started growing our own Christmas trees. Now we, sell them pre-cut or cut your own. And
Have you?
it's just-
Were you selling them before you became an organic farm? or-
Yes, we were selling Christmas trees before that, yep. But, I mean, now they're all raised organically as well, so our whole farm, everything we grow is, raised
Is
organically.
organic.
Yeah.
Are there actually pests and things that do bother the Christmas trees?
Yeah,
Yep.
there's, like, what are they, like the pine weevil?
There's the white
and-
pine weevil tends to bother the spruce.
Yeah,
I think there was a needle cast that bothers Douglas fir. The biggest predator of the Fraser fir is the deer.
the deer, yeah,
Oh.
deer are
They'll-
a problem.
Oh.
Yeah, we have some trees that they just become wreath trees because
Yeah.
the deer have just eaten all the branches in,
Oh.
and the only thing that's left is the top
The
where they can't
top
reach.
one. So do you make wreaths then?
Yep, we
You-
do the wreaths and
you
everything
do that
too.
yourself
Yeah.
then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we sell them right at the house, so it's fairly easy. Our main stand closes down the end of October, and then we move up to our house, which is right next door. We have a sales room in there with all of our, like fall crops and frozen berries and popcorn and honey and maple, and then the Christmas tree sales are up there. So I can actually kind of be in my house, in my kitchen or living room, waiting for customers. I don't have to be freezing out in the cold. down.
Oh, okay, okay.
Our other market is
Okay.
completely open air and
So
gets
you
very cold in the
grow
winter.
you grow popcorn, did you say?
Oh yes, yep. Popcorn's a pretty big crop of ours. Yep, we grow popcorn, and that's always available year round. So
It's nice
I-
because it's not perishable. You
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
Where most everything else is perishable, but
I wonder. I wonder how it is that certain kind of corn pops like that and others don't. Do you know how
well,
that?
it's a
what
certain
that is?
variety. Could you answer
yeah,
that?
I believe popcorn is a type of dent corn. It's got a really hard kernel, or maybe it's a flint corn. It just has a really hard, small kernel, and it just pops better than other like maybe I think maybe the grain corn is more of a dent corn. It's more of a softer kernel. But I believe popcorn is there are different kinds of corn obviously,
Yeah.
but there's like silage corn, which is a lot what most dairy farmers use is because they chop up the whole plant. But then there's the grain corns, and like we'll grow Indian corn too, which is an ornamental corn. It's just kind of a colorful. You've probably seen it. It just has the different colored kernels.
Oh yeah. Is that edible then?
I think it would be edible. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I fed it to my chickens before, but usually for grain corn, they'll grow like I believe it's a dent corn. It's just a softer kerneled corn that you can grind a little easier. But yeah, I think the popcorn is a flint corn, and you can pop that. I'm not sure. I've never tried to pop like a bigger kerneled flint corn, but you might be able to, just because it has to do with the density of the kernel is really what.
And you also have to dry it to a certain moisture content before
Right,
it will
right.
pop. Like you couldn't try popping it right off the cob because it probably, unless it was completely dried on the cob.
Right,
but,
which in our area,
you
we don't usually get dry enough to have it dry out in
Right,
the field, so
right.
we would usually either bring it in and hang it somewhere in just mesh bags until it dries, and then shell it, or we used to have a corn crib, but
Yeah.
haven't used that in a couple of
Haven't
years
used that
to
lately.
dry, but
Yeah.
it does take a little artificial drying. Sometimes in the winter too, they have a popcorn rack. It'll sit near the wood stove, and they'll just put the whole ear in there, and just take take a few kernels at a time and test them and see when they're ready, you know, when they start popping good.
I think your dad can actually put it in his teeth, between his teeth,
But
and
it's
you
probably
can
not
kind
good
of
for
tell.
his teeth.
He can tell.
You can
he
kind of
can
tell when
Yeah.
there's a, you know, when it doesn't give, I suppose, maybe is, I don't try.
Yeah,
but-
so,
Be careful
so
with your
But people that are
So-
used to it
so
can
he
actually
knows-
tell when it's hard enough to start
he
popping.
knows how to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, getting back to the trees now, there's nothing, is there anything you can do about getting the deer to not want to come and chew on your trees, or?
I mean, we've
Yeah.
actually, especially for
fences.
getting the smaller ones established, we've been putting fences up, especially where they're really bad. I mean, I suppose you could you could feed them something else, but they get that time of year, they get desperate. That's kind of what deer naturally eat. That time of year is browse. You know, when there's a heavy snow cover, they can't get to a lot of fresh grass, so they're living on browse, which is obviously the branches on Christmas trees, and they do a lot of damage on blueberries. They'll eat the young 1-year growth, which are the
Oh.
fruiting buds on the blueberry plants too.
Oh, no.
So yeah, it becomes kind of a problem. That's why we're starting to realize how much good the dogs did when we got them out there. They really, you know, helped keep, especially the deer, at bay.
Well, how many acres of trees do you have?
Christmas trees, probably maybe 2 or 3.
I'd probably say at least 3 acres.
3, okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the fruit and vegetables go, what is your acreage like there?
Well, I think we have around 106 acres altogether on the farm, but at any one time, there's probably about half of that into cover crops, you know, building the soil fertility for, you know, other crops. But, I mean, it probably breaks down to somewhere around maybe 10 or 12 acres in fruit crops, and then, you know, maybe another, you know, 30 or so acres in vegetables and other crops, and some grain crops, hay sometimes.
Yeah.
And
A lot of times the Christmas trees and stuff will go on. Sometimes land that's a little more sloped or a little more erodible, so we'll put it, you know, in Christmas trees and sod, and so they can't erode. And it just kind of, whereas, you know, the more flat ground is better suited to where we're going to till and grow vegetables and annual crops. So same with blueberries that go good on the slope too, because they're
Oh,
permanent
okay.
there. You know, you're just mowing between the rows anyways, so it keeps things stable.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm blanking out here.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what other things do you do
we
there
do?
then?
Well, Adam, he elaborated a little bit. We have done chickens in the past, raised eggs and meat. He does some meat birds too,
Yeah, I have my own small farm. I raise poultry and
poultry and things like that.
ducks and chickens, and we do some herbs and
Or
actually do a-
some,
do
a little
a
bit
lot
of
of
little bit of cut flowers and
actually a lot of wild forage stuff too. I have a pretty big patch of ostrich fern, which you can get fiddlehead ferns from on a
yeah.
floodplain, and do some wild mushroom harvesting. And we
Oh,
grew. I actually borrowed some logs from my aunt and my cousin, and we grew some shiitakes last year. But they wanted them back, so. But I mean, yeah, do a lot of different things. We grow some specialty vegetables too, but I like the perennials and the perennial herbs. I do some currants, red and black currants, and the perennials are nice because you don't have to get out there and plant them every year, since I don't have a tractor. That's me doing the annuals is going out there with a spade fork and digging a garden, or just kind of setting
Right.
up a no-till garden setup. But yeah, it's just a small farm, but yeah.
Do you grow beans?
We grew a few. Yeah, we grew a few beans. We did some purple beans. I like to actually let them. I bend over a cattle panel and just kind of let them crawl up over the arc, so I don't have to bend over to pick them. But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we did a
Yeah.
few of them, and we tried a few other dry beans, but you know.
Yeah, some dried beans. Jacob's cattle beans is one that seems to work out pretty good in our garden. We've tried growing lima beans in the past, but they don't seem, most most times we tried having lima beans. It didn't work out.
You can never get much of a yield on them, is what I've found when we've grown them. And you know, some things it's just hard to raise, especially commercially, without charging, you know, like, you know, $20 a pound, which people won't pay, and to still, you know, make it profitable enough to do it.
Do you grow like garlic and onions then?
We do onions. We haven't grown garlic before. That's one thing we haven't. We have some people, you know, that sometimes sell us some garlic that they've raised in their, you know, in their home garden.
Yeah.
You know, to have it on the table when
Yeah,
the
my
season's
husband
in.
plants garlic
Yeah.
in the fall every year.
Yeah.
And then it's usually ready to be harvested like in July, I think, you know,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
We never buy garlic because.
Never buy it. You have always have some on hand.
Yeah, oh yeah. More than
you.
enough for a year's supply. So.
Yeah, a little garlic can go a long ways.
The garlic is a nice one to have out in the garden too. Like if you have rodent problems, I mean, you can even just stick a clove here or there where you in your
That's
strawberries,
true.
even if you think you're going to have rodent, because they don't like
They
they
don't
don't like a
don't.
lot of the alliums, you know, the onions and
Oh.
garlic and stuff and leeks.
Oh.
So I've actually seen some growers, you know, put them out where the rodents can be a problem in other crops.
Yeah, and then yeah, we really like garlic. We eat a lot of it. I guess for cancer prevention, you're
Yeah.
supposed to eat something from the allium family every day. One of my favorite things to do
Well,
in the
there you
spring
go.
is go out in the woods and dig up what most people around here refer to as leeks, but
Right.
Yeah.
they're really supposed to be called ramps. I
Ramps,
guess.
right.
So,
Yeah.
but that's one of my favorite things
Is it?
is the leeks in the
Yeah.
spring. Yeah, it's one of my
cool.
Yeah.
favorite spring experiences.
Yeah, that was another thing we have on our floodplain is some wild onions that come up there every spring. They seem to like that. Where on a floodplain there's like a fresh little deposit of silt. You know, certain plants really seem to like that, and it's just kind of neat the things that you find there. I don't know.
Kind of a muck soil, I think they call it.
Yeah, well,
don't
even
they?
silty
Yeah.
too. I don't know. Wild foraging is fun.
Oh,
it's fun when you get
Yeah,
food
yeah.
and you didn't have to work for it. It's just out there,
Yeah, it's-
weeds.
Yeah, it's fun. A lot of, we try every year with the Vegetarian Society to go for one of our dinners to be out in the country somewhere where we can have an herbalist come and take us on the annual herb walk and show us all of these things that we can eat.
Right.
And I remember there was something my grandfather, when I was a little girl, used to give us to eat. He called it sour grass. But then when we had an herbalist go on the annual herb walk with us, I found out that it's called wood sorrel.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
yeah.
So, and it's a really good source of vitamin C, apparently. So, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
He would.
Is
Yeah.
that the one
I
that,
do.
that kind of looks like a clover?
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
and it gets these
Yep.
little tiny yellow flowers
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
it.
we
Okay.
eat some of that too.
Yeah.
We actually grow a garden sorrel too, which is a perennial, but that looks more like the red sorrel that I don't know if you know what red sorrel looks like. It has kind of like an arrowhead leaf looking to it.
Yeah, and then there's something called, what do they call it? Colt's foot? No, that's not a sorrel, is it?
No, that's
No.
I think they use that as an herb. But
Yeah, colt's foot. So, because the leaves look like a colt's, are shaped sort of like a colt's foot. But as far as cover crops, do you also use clover as a cover crop?
sometimes, yeah, especially when we're taking a piece of ground and we want to rest it and not have it tilled up for a few years, we'll put it in some kind of either like a hay crop or just a perennial grass and clover, because the clover, is being a legume, will, fix nitrogen, with the rhizobium bacteria that colonize the roots of it. So that's really beneficial as a farmer because your crops need nitrogen, and when you integrate these legume crops in there, that's free nitrogen that these, that the legumes have helped produce for you. So yeah, and plus, like you said, the bees love clover too, and it just
They
brings
do.
a lot of other beneficial insects, and it's nice to have these small fields with all these different cover crops and like a field like this with clover, because then with those beneficial insects being right next to, like a vegetable crop or something like that, you just have more predatory insects that are going to keep pest insects at bay. And when you're organic, your threshold or your tolerance for what you might have for pest insect in your crop is a little higher than it would be if you were like conventional, just because you don't want to harm those predators, those beneficial insects that are in there.
Right.
You want that balance to stay there. Then it never really swings, it never really gets out of hand or swings one way or the other. There's just kind of always some little bit of damage here and there, and it's not usually a big deal.
Now, something we've had problems with on some years. Last year we had good luck with the squashes and the cucumbers and like that, because my husband had taken a couple of years off from planting those things because of something he called squash beetles, I think.
Yeah.
And but I've had people tell me to plant, I think they said marigolds beside your cucumbers and squash plants.
I think it's
that they kind of are supposed to repel those particular insects.
Or sometimes I've heard certain other like trap crops, like I think it's Hubbard squash is one they use as a trap crop, isn't it? For
As
a
beetles
trap?
like that.
A trap crop would be where you had a crop that was more attractive to your pest than your actual crop that you're trying to use as your cash crop or your vegetable crop or whatever. And then you would take that cash crop and you would just, it could basically be a sacrifice. Or, if you were really adamant, you could just take that trap crop and when they all went on it, spray it. But it's a sacrifice would be your trap crop.
You know what I bought a package of from somebody a year ago was something called sweet potato squash, which we'd had in our garden before in past years that were more the size of sweet potatoes and were really sweet, like sweet potatoes. But I bought these from somebody at the Biodome, the Biodome project, these sweet potato squashes. I thought it was going to be the same thing. We wound up with these great big...
Oh, really big squash?
Yeah, it's apparently some other variety, and we had a lot of them that were... way bigger than even the big Hubbard squashes. I wonder if they would keep the bugs away from
I don't know,
summer
maybe.
squashes
I know
and the cucumbers.
You just have to try a variety of different squashes and see what they like the best, and maybe grow them their own. I don't know.
Yeah, we had so many of those big squashes. We gave them to all of our friends and everybody that lived near us, and we wound up donating a bunch of them. There was so many of them, and then they're so big, we could have never eaten them all ourselves. We wound up donating some to the outreach center where they have a food pantry and things like that, But we were so surprised to get what we thought were going to be this size.
Right.
And they didn't ripen up as fast as the smaller sweet potato squashes. It was more like in the winter that they were finally ready to be eaten. But anyways, we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and I just want to say thank you again for being on and talking about these things. So hopefully a lot of people will be inspired if they have their own gardens to maybe switch to an organic way of doing it, or trying to find places that they can buy organic fruits and vegetables because people are voting with their dollars.
That's
so
true.
So, okay. So thank you, and I'll see the rest of you in the viewing audience on the next episode in a couple of weeks.